This is episode 109 of the Trauma Coaching for Latter-day Saints podcast, Attachment versus Authenticity. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm a Latter-day Saint mom with a history of trauma. I use my own life experience and spiritual gifts, as well as mindset and somatic tools to help you trade ashes for beauty and end generational trauma. Let's talk about what it takes to truly heal and find lasting joy from the perspective of your nervous system. Merry Christmas, everyone. I know that this episode is dropping the day after Christmas, and I hope that you have just been surrounded by love and joy and peace, and that your Christmas, whether it was or is a long break or whether it is a very short break, was exactly what you wanted it to be and is what you needed. I just told my family, because my kids are off for Christmas break and everyone's home, that I'm going to come into my office to record a podcast. And my son said, Mom, enjoy it so much that you feel like you're sitting on a beach in Hawaii. And that just made me smile, first of all, coming from a 14-year-old boy. And also because that is what I strive for. I strive to make this podcast something that I enjoy so much that you can feel my enjoyment. So that's what we're working toward here. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the basics of attachment theory, which is basically this idea between attachment and authenticity, the tension between those two. And I just want to give credit to where credit is due. I learned this in the program that I'm working through right now with Shyla Cash. She's my coach and mentor. And she brought in an expert named Amy Apigian, who is a doctor and has studied a ton about attachment and like the biology of trauma. So I haven't gone that far yet to understand all of that, but we did do a couple of hours together about attachment and connection and authenticity and all of that. So I want to share with you some of what I learned because it was very enlightening. And also because this time of year where maybe you're spending a little bit more time with your kids or your spouse or extended family members, if you listen to the end, I will tell you why I think this could be especially helpful during these times of year where we spend more time with our family. Okay, so let's look at the very first year of life for an infant. In that first year of life, the attachment or the connection between the infant and the caregiver, particularly mom, is the most important thing for that infant. It is the thing that keeps the infant alive. If mom doesn't meet the needs of baby, then baby dies, right? So attachment is literally a drive within us, a drive within us to connect with other people. And in order to survive, right? So that's like really important to understand that this drive within us to connect with other people isn't simply a nice thing to have. It is literally what keeps us alive. And there have been studies with monkeys that if an infant monkey does not get held and touched, the monkey dies, right? So they can be fed all the food they need and, have all their other needs met. If they are not touched and held and loved in like a touching, connected kind of way, then they die. So it's literally something that we need connection in order to survive. When we look at the infant in that first year of life, and especially the younger, the more true this is, we recognize that trust precedes love. So, as a little newborn baby, the baby has needs. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they need their diaper changed, maybe they're too hot or too cold or tired. Whatever those needs are, the needs are directly related to their survival. When the baby has a need, they get pushed out of their regulation, right? So regulation in this sense is their comfort zone, the felt sense that like everything is okay, I'm okay, life is good. right? So when they say they get hungry, they have a need and their body sends the signal like, oh no, life is not good anymore. Something is wrong. I'm not okay. Right. So they get pushed out of their zone of regulation. And for most babies, they start to grunt or fuss or wiggle. And if it gets far enough, they'll start to cry or scream, right? Those cries, those screams, because a baby cannot verbalize their needs yet, is the only way that infant knows how to say, I have a need. Please come help me. So, most of the time, it's mom who comes to regulate, or in other words, to take care of their need. And in this way, you could think of it in terms of mama saves baby all day long. Mama saves baby's life all day long, right? When baby gets a little hungry, it's like, oh no, I'm going to die. And mama comes and says, it's okay. I'm right here. Here's some food. You're going to be okay. You're not going to die. And then baby goes, oh, okay. Life is good. I'm okay. Everything is beautiful. And I can trust mama. So, this trust is an opening of ourselves to someone who has met a need in us. Now, it's normally mom because mom and baby have literally shared a body. So, baby's cells and nervous system are used to mom. It doesn't have to be mom. It can be anyone who comes and takes care of baby's needs. But the most regulation, the most fulfillment of those needs of the babies is going to happen when mama comes, right? And there's this unspoken, like something in the air between a baby and their mom that baby knows mom. Baby knows how mom feels, how she smells. Just, I kind of think it might be like pheromones or something like that. This unseen, um, it's not like a direct sense, but like the baby knows it's mom. And as soon as mom comes closer, then baby is like, oh, okay, everything is going to be okay. Now, we can build this trust also with other caregivers, with dad or grandparents, siblings, right? But it's the primary caregiver, mom, that is the most important. And if the trust, if this loop that baby goes through, I have a need, I get out of regulation, and then mama comes to regulate me. Because remember, when babies are born, they're just like a raw nerve, right? They don't know how to regulate themselves. They don't have the skills to regulate themselves. So they literally need somebody else to regulate them, to give them food, to help them fall asleep, to um, have a heartbeat kind of pounding along, like, okay, everything is okay, right? Um, I lost my train of thought. So this loop that the baby goes through, the baby has a need, pushes them out of regulation, the caregiver comes and regulates, and then they create trust, right? If that trust is not consistent, then the attachment, the connection will not be consistent either. And in psychological terms, we call this secure attachment. So ideally, the trust is built is very consistent. It's like every time the baby has a need, the caregiver comes and meets that need. And then we call that secure attachment. But I don't know what the percentage is, but I think probably for most of us, and partially because of generational practices, we didn't have that secure attachment. And probably if you're listening to this podcast, you probably didn't have that secure attachment, right? Even if we think of something as simple as different generations um, are taught different practices as far as how to get baby to sleep. So, some, for my parents' generation, it was a cry it out generation. Just imagine in terms of building this trust between baby and caregiver, if you put the baby in the crib and you let them cry it out, their crying means I have a need, something is wrong, I need you. And when you don't come answer that, then they are dysregulated and that trust is eroded, right? So it's not like either you have trust or you don't have trust. It's probably somewhere in the middle. There's like sometimes mom is really good at coming and meeting my needs, and sometimes she's not, right? So there's kind of in a gray area, a continuum, so to speak, of this trust. But psychologists do describe different types of attachment based on the behavior of the child when the caregiver comes and leaves. So the secure attachment is this idea that the trust is built very securely, consistently. So ideally, in the first year of life, that bond is very strong, right? That the baby knows anytime they have a need, mom will be there, or some caregiver will be there, primary caregiver will be there to meet the need. In the second year of life, somewhere around the turn of that second year, the goal for the infant becomes to learn authenticity. So, authenticity is again a drive, like a biological need to know and be ourselves. Things like, what do I like? Who do I want to be? What is my purpose? In the second year of life, if the attachment made with the primary caregiver is secure, then the goal becomes to learn, who am I and can I express that? Now, there is an inherent tension between attachment and authenticity. Okay. In the second year of life, the now toddler, the baby that has grown up a little bit, it's now a toddler, has a desire. And the caregiver creates a boundary or a limit. Most of the time, that sounds like a no. No, you cannot do that. And then the toddler accepts the limit because remember, they trust their caregiver and they have or they grow their freedom or their autonomy. Their authenticity is what we're calling it in this episode. And as I was putting these notes together, I realized that the toddler's desire, sometimes the desire is something that the caregiver says, yes, do it. Like, oh, I want to play with this toy. Okay, let's play with this toy. It's only when their desires reach the limit that the caregiver has set that maybe is the caregiver knows is like not safe for the toddler, right? Is not appropriate in some way. If that first year of life connection is really solid, then the toddler accepts. They accept the limit because they trust mama or whoever it is that is giving the limit. And they grow their freedom, they grow their autonomy, their authenticity, who they are, line upon line, slowly growing their capacity, right? So I know when I was a young mother, sometimes there were things that I knew like, no, 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 we're not going to do that because that's dangerous for you at this phase. But then sometimes there were times when I would say, well, why don't you try it? Let's see what happens. And I'm right here if you need help. So I'm kind of learning the toddler and what their limits are, what their abilities are, in order for me to know where to put that boundary or limit as the caregiver, right? So it's not like toddler has a desire, the parent says no every time, the toddler accepts the limit, and then they create more freedom. That didn't make sense to me. I was like, how does this make sense? And it makes sense because the caregiver is again attuned to the needs of the child and what their skills are and what they can and can't do, what's safe for them, what might scare them, those kinds of things. And so the caregiver lovingly creates boundaries or limits because they know what will keep the baby safe, right? And then the child can slowly grow their freedom, their autonomy according to what is their own capacity, right? So that's kind of the loop. They get more freedom and autonomy, which means that their desires shift, what they want shifts, and the boundaries shift, right? This makes a lot of sense. It kind of points to the fact that this interpersonal relationship between caregiver and child is really important. It's important for that caregiver to be attuned to know the child and what they're capable of in order for them to find out who they are, what they like, what they want to be, what their purpose is, right? It's not necessarily the caregiver's job to assign that purpose or tell the child what they like. That doesn't come from the caregiver, right? That comes from this inherent drive to be authentically ourselves. So that's kind of the basis of attachment theory. It's this idea that between an infant and a caregiver, if the attunement is there, if the needs are met, then a connection that is safe and secure will be formed. And then when it's time for that infant to start to learn about limits and boundaries and who they are and what they want and all of that, that the I think of it as like the base. The base will be very secure. The base will be very safe. And how I sort of see this in my mind's eye is I think of going to the park with a toddler and mom is sitting on the bench, say, and the toddler is climbing up, going down this little slide. And every time they get a little further away from mom, they might look back at mom and be like, "Is it okay?" And mom, if they're attuned, not distracted on their phone or talking to someone else, will lock eyes and be like, "Yeah, it's okay. You can go further." And the baby, the infant, the toddler will learn what their own boundaries are, right? And so in this way, we grow. Oh, like, ooh, I did that. That was scary. Okay, I'm going to go back to mom now because I need to get into my safe place. But what happens when the attachment is not secure, right? Sometimes if mom isn't totally attuned for whatever reason because she doesn't have capacity to be totally attuned, there might be different situations that happen that create different types of attachment, right? So if maybe the relationship between caregiver and child is too much for the child, then the child's going to want to like move away. And we call that avoidant attachment, right? Like, ooh, it's too much to be with you. I need to move away. And if the connection is not enough, then the child might hold on tighter. And we would maybe call that anxious attachment, right? Like, no, don't leave me. Don't leave me. And if it's a little of both, if the child is maybe confused, like sometimes it feels like too much and sometimes it feels like not enough, then they might do both. They might avoid in some situations and they might get really anxious in other situations. And we call that ambivalent or disorganized attachment. It's kind of this message of, I should be by myself because I might hurt people. So, this is definitely the attachment style that I find myself in as I reflect on my life. I don't know how many times I have told myself, I should leave. I shouldn't be here because I'm the problem and I will hurt someone. And this felt sense of sometimes feeling smothered, like I don't have enough space, and also sometimes feeling like I'm all alone and there's too much space. So, my experience is that I'm very much in an ambivalent or a disorganized attachment style. And here's another interesting thing that I learned, which is that if the attachment is not secure in the first year, if we have one of these other styles, avoidant, anxious, or disorganized, then the boundary when in that second year, when the toddler is trying to figure out who they are and exert their authenticity, and then the caregiver says no, it comes across in terms of who are you to tell me no? Almost like a rebelliousness, right? Because that child may not have a secure attachment. It might not feel totally safe to be with that caregiver. And so when the boundary is set, it's like, well, you don't know me. Who are you? Right. So that's where sometimes I'm just equating this in my mind to like terrible twos, right? Of like maybe that attachment isn't totally secure. And if you're a parent listening to this, I don't want you to feel guilty or ashamed. It's not like a cause and effect type of thing because the mom, the caregiver, has their nervous system in their capacity. And then the baby has their nervous system in their capacity. It could be that you did everything to create a secure attachment and you tried as much as you could to be attuned to their needs and to meet their needs. But maybe that particular infant didn't feel, they weren't able to receive that attunement. So there's two different systems at work here and probably many more, right? Because we still got dad and siblings and everybody else in the mix. So really like as much as you can, don't allow yourself to feel guilty, to feel ashamed, and know that it's not the end of the world if we don't create secure attachments. We can create secure attachments later in life. But what I really wanted you to take from this episode is that all behaviors, whether we're children or adults, come back in one form or another to this attachment, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. It's always a bid for connection or a bid for authenticity. And so I've been finding myself as I anticipate my kids, all teenagers now, being home for the break. I find myself reminding myself that no matter what my kids do, it's either a bid for connection or a bid for authenticity. And it's not really about me as their mom. I can make it about me. I can be like, I told you to do XYZ. Why didn't you do it? Why aren't you meeting my need? Right. But ultimately, as parents with children, we want to be able to be the one that meets the needs. And we have to go somewhere else, not to our children, to get our own needs met, right? We go to our parents, our spouse, other people who we're in relationship with that can hold space for us. And I just love this idea. It's super simple that when your child, especially in terms of like misbehavior, quote unquote misbehavior, if you can think about it in terms of, okay, are they wanting connection or are they wanting authenticity? It for me, and I don't know, you can try this on, maybe it's not the same for you, but for me, it helps me feel like it's not about me and it's about them and their needs. And so then for me, it really lowers the reaction of wanting to kind of be in conflict or to fight or to, you know, assert myself as like, I'm the mom, I'm right. You need to get in line with what I want, right? If I'm just like, oh, okay, they have a need. They need to connect right now, or they need to be themselves right now. Okay, I can support them in their need. I get that, right? I also have those needs to connect and to be myself. So that just helps me as we're going to be spending more time together the next few weeks, really get to a more neutral and open space with my relationship with my kids. I have a few journaling questions that might help you reflect and think about this, but these journaling questions are particularly an exercise to help you see how sometimes our need for connection and our need for authenticity actually rub up against each other. So sometimes it's like, ooh, do I want connection more or do I want to be authentically myself more? And sometimes we have to forego one for the other. And those are tough decisions to make. So, question number one is to reflect and write a list of things you've done in the past that were based in a need for connection. So, think about times that you maybe did something or avoided doing something that the reason was because you wanted to connect. Question number two is to reflect and write a list of things you've done that were based in a need for authenticity. So, what types of things have you done or avoided doing because you wanted to express yourself or find out who you were, what you wanted, what your purpose was? And then, question number three is where do you notice friction in these lists. And I'm going to give you an example because I think it'll be helpful. I am a part of a book club. It's several ladies from my ward. And over the years, I have kind of stopped reading the books that were chosen for book club because I've started reading more books about business and life coaching and the things that I'm interested in, like trauma. And I still want to go to book club, but there have been times when I thought, should I quit book club? And what I notice is that I want to go to book club because I want to feel connected to these ladies. This is kind of my social group, right? In real life. So I want to go, I want to attend because I want to be connected to them and I want to know them and just be in community with them. But I don't want to go because those aren't typically, sometimes they pick books that I'm very interested in, but they're not typically the books that I want to be reading. And I want to spend my time reading books that are more in line with me. So you can see how one of these, this one desire is to connect and one desire is to be authentically me, right? And how there's a tension there. It's both about book club and whether or not I'm going to attend, right? So that's kind of a simple surface level example, but I notice sometimes, even in relationship with one person, say my spouse, there are times when I want to connect and times when I want to be authentically me. And sometimes they feel like they're at odds with each other, right? So that's what these journaling questions are getting at is to just notice that sometimes the biological need to connect and the biological need to be authentically yourself come up against each other and we're forced to choose one versus the other, which is never an easy choice, right? So that can bring up some empathy, some compassion for people around us. All right. So I have right now two private coaching spots available. If you've been thinking about coaching with me, I highly recommend that you hop on a free call where you just get to experience what it's like to work with me. And then the other reason for that free call is to feel into, does this feel safe? Does it feel safe to be in relationship with Danita? And sometimes the answer might be no. So if you're interested in private coaching, go to my website and book a free call, and you will get to experience that. And then the other super exciting thing is that I have all the details in place and ready for my group experience next year. We start February 1st. We're going to meet Wednesday afternoons, and it's going to be very inexpensive, very available to a large range of budgets, I hope at least. And I wanted to just say that there for sure is going to be some trauma work in there because it's going to be based in my understanding of the nervous system and things like attachment, polyvagal theory. But it's also going to be a place where you can just come every week and totally be yourself and not have to move toward a goal or fix yourself or anything like that. Just a very open and welcoming space for you to be you and for you to grow your presence. That might be being able to hold space for a child or a spouse or an extended family member or anybody else, a friend, or being able to be present with your own emotional experience. It's kind of hard to encapsulate the feel and what I want people to take away from this group, because honestly, I feel like I'm a pretty intuitive person. So I'm going to allow my intuition to kind of speak to what is needed each month. But there will be some structure as well. I'm going to have a meditation of the month. I'm going to have some somatic practices that we're practicing. I'll probably have a loose theme for each month, but it will be a group that people can join at any point. It might be I haven't quite decided this yet. For now, I'm gonna leave the doors open whenever you want to join, just because I recognize that life is busy and we can't always join groups right when the group starts, right? But I might move to a model where I open the doors about every 3 to 4 months, and then in between those 3 to 4 months, doors are closed just for my own, sanity of keeping track of everything. So, I really invite you to come to that group right now. If you join the group before the end of the year, before December 31st, there's a 25% discount, and I will also do a private human design reading. Human design is not something that I have talked about here on the podcast, but I hope to do an episode in the future. But it's a tool that I have learned recently in the probably the last year and a half that's been very useful to me. I started out skeptical, but now I think it's amazing and useful. And so I can kind of look into your human design and tell you what it means, and kind of just an intro to human design as well as specifically tailored to your human design. So that's just kind of a bonus I'm throwing out there. I also have a bonus for if you refer a friend. I find that really my impact grows based off of word of mouth and based off of creating relationships with people. So I really, really appreciate it when people share what I'm doing in the world. Um, and so I want to be thankful for that. And I want you to benefit from that as well. So if you refer someone that joins the group, then that person gets a 10% discount and you get a private session with me. And the reason why I did that is because not everybody that refers people will actually also themselves be in the group. And so I wanted it to be something that you could benefit from, even if you weren't in the group yourself. So I will drop the link in the show notes and in the description of this episode for the journaling questions for the Presence group. That's the name of the group, Presence. And anything else that I have mentioned that you'll need a link to in this episode. That's enough for now, and so are you. The impact I'm making in the world grows best by word of mouth. Would you please share this episode with someone this week? And if you're ready to address your own trauma with my support, go to danitabremmer.com to schedule a free trauma assessment call. Until next time, go be yourself and follow the spirit.